Every sport has its scandals, but baseball's favorite one came with a side of protein shakes and suspiciously fast recovery times. Yeah, we're talking about the steroid era, that golden age of inflated stats, ballooning biceps, and baseballs flying out of parks like NASA experiments gone wrong. But here's the twist. Everyone wants to blame the players. McGwire, Bonds, Sosa, easy targets. They took the drugs, hit the homers, and became villains in documentaries. But what if the real question isn't who cheated, it's who let them? Because baseball doesn't stumble into the steroid era by accident. It walked right into it, pockets open, eyes wide, dollar signs flashing. And for almost a decade, Major League Baseball wasn't just complicit, it was cashing in. So here's what we're breaking down tonight. How steroids didn't just change baseball, they saved it. How MLB ignored its own rules, dodged accountability, and turned a blind eye to the biggest open secret in sports. And how the fallout left a permanent stain on the game's history. Ready to talk about the era when everyone hit bombs, nobody asked questions, and the league pretended it was all magic? Let's rewind to where the whole thing started, when baseball was dying and steroids looked like salvation. The perfect storm. Baseball's crisis and the birth of the boom. 1994 wasn't just a bad year for baseball, it was an apocalypse. For the first time in 90 years, there was no World Series, gone, canceled that fall. While football filled Sundays and basketball turned into primetime entertainment, baseball became a national disappointment. Fans weren't mad, they were done. You had kids who used to imitate Ken Griffey Jr.'s swing now wearing Chicago Bulls jerseys. Fathers who once scored games by hand were mowing the lawn instead. The strike didn't just stop baseball, it broke the relationship between the game and the country that loved it. When baseball came crawling back in 1995, attendance was down 20%. Entire sections of stadiums sat empty. Players were booed in their own cities. The sport that had built its reputation on tradition was suddenly old news. The national pastime was a punchline about greed. Then, out of nowhere, came the summer of '98. Mark McGwire in St. Louis, Sammy Sosa in Chicago. 2 sluggers, one red, one blue. Hitting balls so far they practically entered orbit. Suddenly, people cared again. Every night felt like an event. Fans who had sworn off baseball were back in the stands with scorecards and hot dogs. When McGwire broke Roger Maris's home run record, it wasn't just a baseball moment. It was a cultural reset. He hugged Maris's family. The crowd went silent. Then the entire country erupted. The newspapers ran it on front pages, not sports sections. Kids ran outside pretending to hit number 62. And behind that miracle season, nobody wanted to ask the obvious question, how did this happen? Everyone loved the show too much. The league, the media, the fans, all addicted to the power surge. Baseball was back from the dead, and nobody cared that the defibrillator was chemical. The policy that wasn't enforced. Now, here's the irony. Baseball did have a steroid policy. It just didn't matter. In 1991, Commissioner Fay Vincent set out a memo banning steroids. Not strongly discouraging, not monitoring, banned. The problem? It was buried like a bad secret. Some clubs never even received it. Others tacked it to a random bulletin board next to the laundry schedule. Players laughed it off. Sure, no steroids, they'd joke, while shaking up protein shakes that looked suspiciously like chemistry experiments. Trainers knew, coaches suspected, but without testing, a ban meant nothing. It was like outlawing ghosts. Inside clubhouses, that memo might as well have been written in invisible ink. Players joked that the only thing truly banned in baseball was common sense. Everyone was doing supplement stacks. Strength coaches were handing out vitamin packs. Guys showed up to spring training 30 pounds heavier and nobody blinked. Fay Vincent called his memo a moral statement. But morality doesn't win ball games. Muscle does. And once the home runs started flying, the league had zero incentive to follow through. By the time Bud Selig reissued the same memo in 1997, the players were miles ahead. Steroids weren't a secret anymore. They were part of the game. One clubhouse attendant later said he found a bag of syringes belonging to a pitcher in 2000 and sent it up the chain to the commissioner's office. Nothing happened. No call, no meeting, not even a fine. The message was clear. As long as you were hitting, we're not asking. By the late 90s, the rule book said steroids were illegal, but the mirror said otherwise. Players were bigger than ever, faster than ever, and MLB, the same league that claimed to protect integrity, was watching its business boom. And that's the point where silence became strategy. Everyone knew, and no one stopped it. By the mid-90s, the secret wasn't even a secret anymore. Everyone in baseball knew something was up. Tony Gwynn talked about it publicly in 1995. "It's the big secret we're not supposed to talk about," he said. But we all wonder. Front offices knew too. Padres GM Randy Smith estimated 20% of players were using. Another GM said 30%. Trainers, clubhouse staff, reporters, all saw it. Kirk Radomski, a Mets clubhouse attendant, later admitted to selling steroids directly to players. Brian McNamee, a trainer for the Yankees and Blue Jays, said he injected Roger Clemens and Andy Pettitte himself. And in San Francisco, Giants trainer Stan Conti told his GM in 2002 that Barry Bonds' personal trainer was handing out steroids in the clubhouse. The GM basically said, "Handle it yourself." Nothing changed. Players joked about it. Ken Caminiti said half the league was using. Even pitchers were juicing. Everyone knew the playing field wasn't level. It was jacked up. Chemically and literally. So the question isn't whether MLB knew, it's why they didn't care. And the answer is simple. Because fans loved it, and as long as the home runs were flying, the money was too. And nobody in a suit was willing to stop the golden goose, even if it was injecting itself in the bathroom. The union and the cover story. Whenever Bud Selig got pressed about why the league didn't test for steroids sooner, he had a go-to excuse: the players' union. He'd say, "We tried, but they wouldn't let us test." And technically, he wasn't lying. Donald Fair and the union resisted testing for years, saying it was a privacy issue. But let's be real, MLB wasn't exactly kicking down doors to make it happen. The owners had no reason to fight hard. Revenues were climbing. Stadiums were selling out. Everyone was making money. Why stop the party? This was the perfect stalemate. The union got to say, "We're protecting player rights." The league got to say, "We tried." And meanwhile, players kept juicing and the home run totals kept climbing. Jose Canseco spelled it out in his book, Juiced. He said everyone knew. Owners, players, executives. They knew what I was doing. He said they knew what everyone was doing. Was he exaggerating? Sure, he's Jose Canseco, but even a broken bat hits one out every now and then. It wasn't a conspiracy. It was an understanding. MLB didn't need to hold meetings about it. They just needed to keep pretending it wasn't happening. The House of Cards, Balco, and the Congressional Reckoning. Then 2003 hit. And the House of Cards finally started wobbling. Federal agents raided Balco, a lab in California linked to dozens of athletes, including Barry Bonds, Jason Giambi, and Gary Sheffield. Suddenly, press had names, evidence, and lab results. Baseball's worst-kept secret was now on the front page. MLB scrambled. They announced anonymous testing, but only as a survey. If fewer than 5% of players tested positive, they'd cancel testing entirely. How convenient. Of course, more than 5% failed. So in 2004, real testing began. Kinda. The first penalty for using steroids was treatment, not suspension, not a fine, just "please stop doing drugs, champ." Then Congress got involved. March 2005. McGwire, Palmeiro, and Sosa sat in front of cameras looking like kids who got caught with cheat sheets. McGwire said, "I'm not here to talk about the past." Palmeiro wagged his finger and said, "I've never used steroids." 5 months later, he tested positive. You can't write irony like that. Congress roasted MLB. Senator John McCain told him they were turning the game into a fraud. They weren't wrong. Baseball had been lying to itself for over a decade, and now the whole world was watching. The Mitchell Report. Baseball on trial. So, MLB did what big organizations always do when cornered. They formed a commission. Enter the 2007 Mitchell Report. Over 400 pages of receipts, interviews, and "we probably should have done something sooner" confessions. It named 89 players, including MVPs, Cy Young winners, and future Hall of Famers. But the real bombshell wasn't who got caught. It was the conclusion. Steroids weren't a player problem. They were a system problem. The report said it outright. It was a collective failure. Owners, management, the commissioner's office, the union, everyone. MLB had rules but didn't enforce them. They had evidence but ignored it. Even worse, they acted shocked afterward. Bud Selig claimed he didn't realize how widespread it was until the early 2000s. Come on. Players were transforming like action figures. Heads growing, bodies doubling in size, and nobody thought to ask questions. The Mitchell Report basically said what fans already knew. Baseball didn't just overlook steroids, it profited off them. The convenient ignorance defense. Selig's favorite defense later was that he was late to grasp the scope of the problem. Translation: I ignored it until I couldn't anymore. In his memoir, he even blamed reporters like Bob Costas for enjoying the home run chase too much. That's like a bank robber blaming the crowd for watching him on TV. Meanwhile, baseball's revenue exploded. Attendance broke records. Stadiums got public funding. Everyone made money. And the players, they kept hitting. They looked like linebackers with batting gloves. One GM said, "You don't put on 50 pounds of muscle overnight unless you're lifting small cars." But as long as the turnstiles kept spinning, MLB didn't care what was spinning in the locker room. Steroids saved baseball after the strike, and the people in charge knew it. So no, the league didn't miss the signs. They chose to ignore them because every 500-foot home run was worth more than any moral lecture about integrity. Media's role, the myth machine. Now, let's talk about the media, because they were in on the ride too. Every sports network, every columnist, every highlight reel fed the hype. McGwire's home runs had their own countdown clocks. ESPN ran Sosa versus McGwire graphics like it was a heavyweight title fight. And not one person asked, "Hey, how's everyone suddenly benching 400 pounds? Reporters weren't dumb. They saw the transformation up close. They saw the acne, the swollen faces, the muscle inflation. But questioning it would ruin the story. And the story was gold. Home runs sold papers, boosted ratings, and made baseball relevant again. Everyone wanted to be part of the comeback. No one wanted to be the wet blanket who said, "Maybe this is fake." So the press joined the silence. They glorified the spectacle, and when the truth came out, they turned around and acted shocked. "How could this happen?" they asked. Buddy, you were filming it. The steroid era wasn't just a failure of baseball leadership. It was a collective agreement to suspend disbelief. The player's dilemma: fame, pressure, and survival. Not every player who used steroids was chasing immortality. Most of them were just trying to keep their job. Think about the life of a fringe major leaguer. The guy hitting 240 and praying for another contract. The guy who knows one bad slump means a bus ride back to AAA. For him, steroids weren't about home runs. They were about rent. Aging veterans saw the writing on the wall. Their reflexes were fading. Their recovery was slower. Their kids were in college. One more good season might buy them another year. One more year meant one more paycheck. So when a teammate whispered about a little help, it didn't sound like cheating. It sounded like survival. Inside the clubhouse, the moral lines blurred fast. You'd see a teammate show up to spring training suddenly built like a linebacker, hitting balls he used to miss by a foot. And you'd think, do I join him or fall behind? The public saw villains. Inside baseball, it looked different. The league was silent. The union fought against testing. Coaches didn't ask questions. It started to feel like everyone had quietly agreed that if you weren't cheating, you weren't trying. One minor leaguer once said, "I didn't see a needle. I saw a promotion." That's the reality nobody wants to admit. These weren't supervillains. They were workers in a system that rewarded silence and punished honesty. The crowd booed them for ruining the game, but the game itself had already told them to do whatever it took to keep up. The difference between disgraced and rich came down to who got caught. When the league looked the other way, players took that as permission. And when the walls finally closed in, they were left holding the syringe, while the people who built the system kept their hands clean. The aftermath: fallout and reform. When testing finally arrived in 2005, baseball looked like it just sobered up after a decade-long bender. Overnight, the game changed. Bodies deflated. Power numbers dipped. Pitchers ruled again. Those 500-foot home runs? Gone. Suddenly, games looked like the 80s again. Small ball, defense, strategy. Fans said it felt cleaner. Maybe it did, but it didn't feel the same. MLB rolled out new rules, new penalties, and education programs. 50-game bans for first offenses, 100 for the second, a lifetime for the third. Players were tested randomly, year-round. Seminars were held. Doctors came to clubhouses to explain side effects. On paper, baseball had finally found religion, but trust doesn't rebuild that fast. The fans who'd once worshipped McGwire, Sosa, and Bonds now looked at their record books with suspicion. Those jaw-dropping numbers from the late 90s, they felt fake. And once magic starts to feel fake, it's gone forever. You could see it in the players, too. The new generation grew up in the shadow of suspicion. Every breakout season came with whispers. Every big body was under review. Even clean players carried the guilt of the era before them. And for every player banned, another quietly disappeared. Guys who had built their entire careers on chemical strength couldn't compete without it. Their averages dropped, their velocity faded, and suddenly they were gone. Ghosts of an era that baseball wanted to forget. The league called it progress. Fans called it justice. But deep down, everyone knew something had been lost. The numbers went back to normal. The trust wasn't. The legacy question: Hall of Fame and fan trust. This is where the debate still lives. Should steroid era players be in the Hall? Statistically, absolutely. Morally, depends who you ask. The Hall has plenty of racists, gamblers, and spitball artists already enshrined, but somehow PEDs became the ultimate sin. Maybe because steroids made fans feel tricked, like the magic wasn't real. Beltran missed his Hall shot over the Astros scandal. Bonds and Clemens missed theirs over steroids. But if MLB made money off their performances, doesn't it share the guilt? That's the paradox. The league punished the same players who saved its business. The fans cheered them when it was convenient and booed them when it wasn't. They hit their way into history and into exile. Unanswered questions. Here's the part that still bugs me. Were the Astros the first to cheat? Of course not. Were the steroid guys the last? Not even close. Cheating evolves. Always has. Spitballs became pine tar. Pine tar became tech. Tech became trash cans. So was MLB complicit in the steroid era? Absolutely. The evidence is everywhere, but it's bigger than that. The real question is, how much cheating will baseball always tolerate in the name of entertainment? Because every scandal starts the same way, with silence, and every silence starts with someone in charge deciding it's better for the business to not look too close. The lie baseball lived with. The steroid era wasn't an accident. It was a deal. Unspoken, profitable, and convenient. Players juiced. The league ignored it. The media hyped it. Fans bought tickets. Everyone got what they wanted until the truth came out. Baseball survived, but its innocence didn't. So here's my question to you. When you think of the steroid era, do you see villains or victims of a system that pushed them there? Drop your take in the comments. And if you want more stories about how sports save themselves by selling their souls, hit subscribe, because the PED era didn't destroy baseball. It exposed it, and maybe it showed us what the game's always been about: winning first, explaining later.